first up is Gerad talking about mobile apps.
Hi, I'm Gerad. So I'm going to talk to you. Oh, this was working a second ago.
I see it moving.
Sorry.
There we go.
So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Backbone, building a kind of, I guess thick client was what I was calling it earlier, but a hybrid app, something that's both on the phone and on the web, and like LinkedIn has really kind of made popular, like storing a lot of the HTML and the JavaScript in the actual application binary, so that you have a very fast experience using a native app, but it still runs HTML code. And so, in particular, what I'm going to talk about is the side project that myself and my business partner have called trackyourhappiness.org. It's a mobile app that helps people track what makes them happy. And it's kind of an interesting thing because my co-founder started this project with his friend from Duke, who's now at Harvard. And it was kind of a side project for them, and it has ended up becoming one of the biggest happiness studies in the world. We've actually collected about 1 million survey responses through this. Tens of thousands of people have used it. And the way it works is it asks you questions. Every once in a while, it will send you a text message and ask you a question, and then direct you to a mobile website, ask you a question, and then you fill it out, and eventually you get a report of your happiness. One of the things that's interesting about this app is it hasn't yet existed as a mobile app download. It's not in the App Store. It's always been an HTML5 mobile app. And the reason for this is it was actually started back before even the iPhones had a real app experience, and we just never got around to updating it until recently. So we have some interesting constraints with this project. In particular, we want to share the code base and let people who are currently taking more than 1 million surveys continue to do it on the web. But then a lot of people keep asking us for the mobile app experience. They don't want to receive SMSs, they want push notifications. And so we wanted to have the same experience in a native app. And so we wanted to reuse the code base and have just one code base to maintain. And so that's why we decided to build this kind of hybrid app. And so we'll talk about some things that we saw about this. So I'm going to start with a Backbone.js login system deep dive. And then kind of tell you what we're doing. And then, depending on time, so you'll probably have to cut me off, but there's some just certain little tips that we saw that might be useful for people to have. And these are particularly mostly Rails specific. And so if you use Rails, how many people here actually have used Backbone at all? Is it almost everybody? Okay. And then what about how many people use Rails? Okay. So it'll hopefully be pretty useful for you. So if you want to follow along in this presentation, or you want to get to it later, we'll send, I'm sure, a link in the speaker notes too. But it's at google.yknac. So if people want to follow along on their own. In case it looks like it's plenty big, but sometimes the examples can be kind of small. So I'll just walk you through the UI we're going to talk about today. It's just a simple sign-in flow, and then you get to a report. So this is a deep dive into our login system. I'm going to show you the code, how it works, and what's going on with it. And then the high-level architecture is we have, these are all pretty standard Backbone paradigms. A router, a couple models. In particular, the router has a login model, which is kind of maybe a little bit interesting. The login model has a person, which is maybe a little interesting too. And then some views that render that out. So I'm going to walk you through kind of how our login code works. So first, the initial flow. So what happens initially, again, this is probably old hat to you all, so I'm going to go through it quickly. But we have the main app extends backbone.router. There's a root route. And basically what the root route is going to do is it's going to check if there's a person. So we actually end up storing local person in local storage if we have one. And if there is, then navigate to the home route. Otherwise, we're going to show the login screen. And then the login screen is going to trigger the login route, and the login route is just going to render the login view. So pretty vanilla. Then the login view shows up, and then you enter a password. And then when you submit the login form, there's the login view here is listening, and it's going to call it has a login model. If we go back, the login view has the login model, which is this guy here. It's going to just call login with whatever's in the login form, which is just an email and password. And then the login model actually just calls a vanilla save. And then on success, we actually send back a person object in the login response. And so we just set the person on the login model's data. So after it's going to go try to log in, send a request to the Rails server. Rails server is going to send back a response with a person in it. And then the login model is going to set its own person. And then we are actually not entirely RESTful. So we actually make sure that the login model always posts by setting this is new to true. So it's just kind of a nice little hack to always make sure that your model posts, which was something I want to call out. So then when the login model sets the person, the router, the backbone router here, which is our main app, it's going to call setPerson, which is here. And then it's going to tell the app, OK, we'll store the person. And this is, if I was going to show this, this is where we would set things in local storage so that the person will reload if you reload the app. And then that's going to call navigate to home. And then home is going to then drop down to show your home page. And you see this. So that's kind of just how our login system works, and that's a deep dive. Was that OK? Any questions? Does it all make sense to people? All right, great. So I want to talk through a couple tips then we came out with and figuring out how to make this work in our existing Rails system. Again, reporting the existing system to this new way of doing things. So one, how do we handle security errors, right? You try to access something that you shouldn't be able to access, by typing in a URL, for example. So what we do here is all the backbone requests come in as requesting a JSON format. And so whereas if there was an HTML request, we would just redirect to the login page, so we show a big login page. We say, OK, well, this is a JSON request, so we're just going to, redirects don't really play nicely with JSON. So we just want to do or with an Ajax request. So we're going to return an unauthorized status. So basically just return something simple that says, OK, no, you can't access that resource. And let Backbone take care of figuring out what to do, right? So how do we catch this, right? Because potentially any request can return this, like any request to a certain object. So what we do is we actually override the Backbone sync in our router. And what we do is we say, OK, we'll override the error. So if you return a 401, then you're going to get an error back from jQuery Ajax or whatever you're using to perform your sync. And then what we do is we set the person to null. And then that causes the change person, which causes set person, which calls route. And route will then, since the person is null, will navigate to the login. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? All right. So then the second thing we wanted to do is handle URLs. So because we're building a thick client native app, when you have because we're packaging this on the phone, we're actually packaging it in files, right? So a relative URL to like /people/login isn't going to work because that's going to be relative to a file. So we wanted to have the full URL. So this is breaking into some Rails code. But what we decided to do was in our main kind of shell HTML, we set up a bunch of URL variables that have all the full URLs instead of the relative URLs to all the assets that we might need. So for example, if we want to send a link to forgot your password, or if we want to know where the where like different assets are, all of these URLs would be here in this file, which makes it really convenient because if I want to if I want to then rewrite the URLs, which we'll see in a bit, like for example, to translate something that's running against localhost to something that should be running against production, is super easy. And so why would I want to translate something that's running against localhost to something that's running against production? And this is because we want to package this for iOS. So what we want to do is we want to take this whole app that looks like it's living on the web somewhere on your development machine, and then make it look like it's point to production. So, and we want to do this naturally, so it's just part of the iOS build. So basically, what you want to do is you want to set up a script to run that's going to basically go through and download your mobile app and package it into into your bundle that will then go into the iOS client. And so basically, the way you can do that is in Xcode. And you set up, and there's this nice little run script part of your build. And then, because you could type it in right here, but it's kind of annoying, so it's nice to just call out to your Rails app. And you can call relative to your project, which is really nice. You don't have to hard code anything. Everybody in your team can just download the Xcode project and run it. And so what does that do? Well, what we do is we actually pull down the app with Node.js and OpenURI, and we parse it, and we figure out what needs to be rewritten. And then we download all the CS and all the JavaScript into the right spot so that where Xcode's expecting it, so it can build that app. And then what we do is we rewrite all those URLs that we had kind of put in the main container, so that we change them from being whatever the root was, the localhost 3000, to the production URL. So that then, or if I'm still developing, then I might want it to be on the app but pointed to my development machine. Or I might want it to be on the phone but pointed to my development machine. So that it's super easy to package something up. You can look at it and run it and develop with it. So then another tip, one of the really thing, so we lucked out because we were using Rails before, but one of the nice things about Rails is it has this great asset pipeline that lets you package up JavaScript in a very nice way. And if you notice, all of my examples were in CoffeeScript because it's terse and fits on slides better. But it can also, you compile things very easily. And so you can write your app in CoffeeScript. And so one of the things that we ended up doing is we have the iOS app here that packages all of its assets into the www directory, which is a holdover from PhoneGap, which we started using but we gave up on because we wanted a more native hybrid experience. And then all of our JavaScripts live underneath this mobile app directory in lib. And they all get compiled by Rails correctly. And so we can keep things in separate folders, one for the models, one for the templates, one for the views. We actually can keep models and views in the same files, models and collections in the same files, just because they seem to be reused a lot and highly related. And so everything gets built, compiled into this www directory, and you stay out of the app directory in Rails, which is nice because since we're developing this right now, we're just developing the mobile app independently, and so eventually they'll be combined. But right now, we're not combining it with the main app, the main web app, and so this will not get included by default in your main application JavaScript file. So it's kind of a nice little trick was to keep it in lib. And then the last thing, which was kind of maybe the most annoying to figure out what was going on, is handling the cross-site Ajax requests. So because the mobile app is running, when it's on your phone, it's running from files, you can do actually cross-site Ajax, which is something you can't usually do on the web. We're all used to having constraints. And so, but there are some things you need to do in order to get Rails to understand it and jQuery to play nicely with it. So this is the same override backbone sync from before we were looking at. And you see there's this option error that we had earlier. And so there are a couple little things we had to do in order to get Rails to play nicely with their cross-site Ajax. And so we do those all in the before send. You can do this globally in jQuery, but then you run the risk of other Ajax calls that aren't going out with Backbone getting things like a CRSF token, which really shouldn't be shared off your main site. So we only do it for the Backbone requests. And so one of the things is, if it looks like a cross-site request, which your request will, jQuery is not going to set the XHR header, which means that Rails isn't going to think your requests are XML HTTP requests, and then you're not going to skip certain cross-site request forgery protection issues. And the same thing here is we also try to play nicely with Rails and set them the CSRF token, which also helps prevent Rails determine what's a cross-site request. And so what we do is we actually store a CSRF token on the person because that's not actually available in a cookie, because our cookies are HTTP only, so JavaScript can't see them. So we store a token on the person which matches the cookie. And then we set that XHR request header, which you'll see like Rails will do in some of their own internal things, but they usually pull it from a tag on the page. But since we compiled this page like long before the request, it doesn't have a valid CSRF token. And then what we do in order to get that CSRF token into the person is we merge in the form authenticity token in the people controller on login. So you get a valid CSRF token right there, and then you can store it on the person. So that's all I have. I think it might have been a lot, but are there any questions? Anything I could make more clear, or anybody else have similar experiences? Okay, yeah.
You tried to make this in more Android also?
That's in the plan. We haven't done it yet, but it should be very easy. We're rolling all our own code around it, so there's a little bit of notification work we'll have to do, but Android supports all of this.
How about the Windows phones?
Again, it's the same idea. It should be pretty easy. The Windows phones are a little bit harder because these are all this is all one browser type. It all is the same browser type as Chrome and Safari. Windows Phone runs a different browser type, which is not as advanced in a lot of ways. So it's on the radar, but it's probably not going to happen soon.
Why do you want to do native apps again, as opposed to you're doing a web page, which to me is the way to do it, unless you want to charge for it. What's the logic?
So there's a couple things. So one is the primary one is actually notification. So right now what we do is we have to send people an SMS to get them to take a survey, right? This is something that goes out and prompts them every once in a while to take a survey. And so we actually only support certain countries because of that SMS restriction. And we actually, even now, we do it in a hacky way through an SMS to email gateway, so we don't have to pay for these surveys, because we've sent 10 million survey notifications. So that adds up, even at a few cents each. So what we really want, the primary reason is push notifications, right? So that's what the real driver is. But then secondarily, it's nice if you do have an app to get a good performance benefit, and that's why we want to package everything in the native app. Not to mention Apple's requirements are such that they kind of frown on you loading up your whole app from the web every time it runs. It seems like that violates App Store monitoring. We're out of time. Last question, or all right? That's it.
I have a suggestion.
I might add, AppMobi has sort of the same sort of thing where I've asked them, they basically have a framework or toolkit, and make an application with AppMobi, and you can dynamically change the things. Apple apparently approves their thing, but basically you can do almost anything with it. It's a toolkit that dynamically allows you to create applications. So I don't understand the whole Apple thing of approval, but apparently with AppMobi, they give you a toolkit, and at that point, you're free to do whatever you want with HTML.
I mean, you just can't guarantee Apple will approve it. That's the only thing.
Yeah, it's true.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.